There's also going to be subtle blue lighting sort of from the sky, sort of like it's moonlight, that just provides like a very subtle. Let me wait for this bus. I assume my microphone's picking that up. All right, guys. I've finally gone back around to making some sort of sizable progress on this project again. So what I have here for you guys today is just sort of an overview of the game itself and some of the game mechanics that I've been working on fleshing out a bit more. So as you can see here, it is still unnamed. That's why this title slide is calling it the Corn Maze game, which I hope is not the final name. I'm pretty sure I can figure out something a bit more creative than that before the end of this, but for now that's what we're running with. So Corn Maze game it is. And this is a quote I wrote that I'm pretty proud of that I think encapsulates the overall vision of the game. So it goes, "The truest form of isolation comes when one is abandoned by even their own self. The most distressing form of isolation comes when one believes themselves abandoned but not alone." And I feel that like that encapsulates a lot of good psychological horror in general, where there's that feeling of isolation, of loneliness, like you're away from safety and people, but you're not truly alone. There's something else there, but it's not friendly. All right, so the overall overview of the game is it is going to be first-person psychological horror. It is going to be kind of following in the footsteps of walking simulators. Like, it's going to be kind of an experience where you're just going through the environment and maybe interacting with a few things. The theme is, of course, isolation, if you couldn't guess by the quote at the beginning. The setting is a Halloween corn maze, of course, at the crux of night. Very old-fashioned farmhouse style surroundings. So it is going to have some of those cheap, corny Halloween corn maze jump scares and decorations around, just to spice it up a little bit, so it's not just an empty corn maze. The synopsis I'm also proud of writing here. Immerse yourself in a child's worst nightmare. From behind their fearful eyes, traverse the labyrinthine pathways of an ominous corn maze, equipped with only a feeble flashlight, and quietly peel back the layers of a darker mystery. Will you trust the maze to show you the way, or will you still cling to your lesser instincts when the shadows begin to whisper and dance at the periphery of your senses? So hopefully that gets some people excited and interested in the game. The atmosphere and style, the art style is going to be realism. I know it's kind of boring, but I like it. I like it a lot for horror, especially, and for this project I think it'll work the best. So I'm referencing things like Until Dawn, one of my favorite horror games. Outlast 2 is a good example too, especially because it has cornfields in it. And also just a lot of recent games, especially indie games, have used the tools at their disposal, like Unreal Engine, that have allowed them to make very, very, very realistic environments. So I'm hoping to do something sort of like that. The lighting and color of the game, it is going to be high contrast with a lot of very dark areas, of course, to make you wonder what could be in the darkness, hiding and waiting. There's going to be very limited areas of warm light that kind of feel like safety in a way. There's also going to be subtle blue lighting sort of from the sky, sort of like it's moonlight, that just provides like a very subtle definition to the object so that you can kind of see some details but not too much. And also I think the player's flashlight will probably also be blue, because I want to reserve the warm colors for the actual lamp posts in the level. Yeah. And the atmosphere, of course, is going to be dark, foreboding, and eerily quiet. I really want to highlight the isolation feeling. Everything should feel kind of real and kind of dead, but not too dead. Like it's just quiet and silent, but there's something else there, and you don't know what or where. Yeah. So just exaggerating that stillness, that silence, and focusing on those more subtle and natural sounds from the environment. Things like your own footsteps sounding like they might be coming from behind you, or the rustle of the corn stalks making you think that something's coming out of them, sort of thing, just to like keep you on edge the whole time. The music style is going to be very limited. Any music there's definitely going to be some of this early 1900s. I'm calling it melancholic jazz, sort of like that uncanny, eerie, sad jazz music with all the noise filters over it that are from like the early 1900s. Just to sort of fit with that old farmhouse style aesthetic and that sort of uncanny eeriness of it. And then any other music is going to be very atmospheric and feel like it comes from the environment itself in some way. On to some of the gameplay mechanics I'm thinking about. The flashlight is pretty obvious. I think it's going to be a tool built into the character that doesn't, like, I don't think I'm going to do batteries or anything like that. Like a lot of horror games, you have to collect batteries or your flashlight runs out. I don't think I'm going to do anything like that. I kind of just want it to be something you have permanently. I can use anytime. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. The gramophones, obviously, yeah, they're old gramophones. The fact they're positioned between two cattle gates will be somewhat important, and I'll explain that in another slide. But they're basically going to represent the transition from one zone of the maze to another zone of the maze, and they're where the player brings vinyls that they collect so that they can play them. The vinyls, they're obviously vinyl discs that you can play at the gramophones. I'm not 100% sure how they're going to come into play yet, but some way or another, players are going to have to find the vinyls and bring them back to gramophones in order to play them. And I think they're going to be tied to some elements of like a bigger story going on in the game, that you unlock that progression through the vinyls and you hear some narration or something of the story that's going on. Now, the cattle gates, as I mentioned, they're pretty much just going to be barriers, mostly for the gramophone, so the areas in between zones. So basically, you have to complete puzzles or get keys or something like that, and then you have to be able to unlock those gates in order to progress to the next area. Yeah, that is all the slides that I'm going to show you guys for now, because I have a lot more, but they get into more spoilery territory, and I feel like these are a good basis for you guys to see where this game is going without spoiling anything. Okay, so another thing I went ahead and did here is I started playing around with some maze layout designs, and don't worry, these aren't spoilery. I have made some new ones since then. They're completely different, but these are just my first attempts just to play around with some ideas. Obviously the white are the pathways. The blue spots here are the start and end. So each of these represents a separate zone. So you would basically solve puzzles within one of these zones in order to access the exit, which would bring you into a new zone. So then the green spots here are basically important landmarks. They're things that you need to find or interact with in some way in order to solve the puzzles and eventually get out. I want to try to be careful not to get too complex with them, but at the same time I want each section of the maze to feel fun and unique and not just be you walking from one spot to another and trying to get out. I don't want it to just feel like a maze. I want it to kind of feel like a story and have some things happen, and you have to interact with some things. I'm trying to figure out how long it's going to take to get through each zone and how much work each zone is going to be. But I'm thinking probably something like 2 to 3 zones, plus like an intro zone. So there'd be one zone that's smaller that would just kind of introduce you to the story and the gameplay mechanics. And then once you get through that, there'd be maybe 2 or 3 more zones and then the end. And that, I think, will probably be a good amount for the overall game. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. I hope these ideas sound like they're going in a good direction, and I'm gonna obviously start polishing up and actually putting together the game in a way that I can start testing things out and see how everything is coming together and looking. But yeah, I'm super excited to keep going, and hopefully I'll get a little bit more done in time for Halloween to show it off, and then probably won't get much more progress done until early next year, unfortunately. Don't worry, I promise I'm not going to talk over this entire thing, but just for reference, this cornstalk is still technically a prototype. It is a prototype that I spent a lot of time on just because I wanted to have a chance to properly model out and texture and animate one single cornstalk just to see sort of where I could improve and where the problems might come up so that I could restart fresh from scratch and get everything right once I do the real thing after this. And also don't mind me having no idea how to model out this first leaf here, trying to get it to wrap around the cornstalk, and it just wasn't working for me, but I do have some plans for much better ways to model out these leaves for the next one. And that said, I'm really proud of how it turned out. You guys are going to see it by the end of this video, but this first cornstalk really does look great with all the polishing touches on it, so I'm really looking forward to restarting the cornstalks yet again from scratch and actually being able to do them properly and have that variety of all the different kinds of cornstalks with all their final textures and animations and everything. It's going to look really cool. Okay, so we are about an hour into me playing around with these wind settings, trying to get the corn stalks to move in the wind, and this is where we're at.
Now, the main problem area is up here. All of this going on up here is what's causing me the most physical discomfort. It's like a visceral reaction of discontent coming from this area. This area is not good either. I hate this, but I'm mainly worried about this.
So, believe it or not, this is actually a good thing, because for most of the past hour, I've been trying to figure out why nothing was moving at all. So this is really the ideal outcome so far, because I don't know if it's just because I'm using Unreal Engine 5 and the tutorial I'm basing it on is for Unreal Engine 4. But there are all sorts of extra issues that I had to try and resolve, and I couldn't really find any help or answers in the comments or anything. So, yeah, I was kind of messing around with a few things, and long story short, this is all stuff I don't understand, but it was giving me errors on a few of them, which I eventually figured out how to fix. The problem was it still wasn't working, so then cue me taking some of these parameters and just multiplying them as much as possible to try and see if the effect was just too small for me to see or something. It still wasn't doing anything. And then I realized that on the actual material editor thing here, I actually have to apply the changes. So yeah, I got to the point where it got so extreme it was doing this crazy stuff here, and I thought there's no way I'm not going to see it if it's working. And it wasn't working. But then I came back and realized I have to apply it first. And once I did that, yeah, this is what we get. So, like I said, good news actually, because now I just have to change a few numbers around and it should work. It is now actually the next day, but I did make some progress, so let me show you what's going on here. The unfortunate thing is I don't think this is working as well as I'd hoped it would. So I obviously tweaked a lot of the numbers. It's a lot more subtle now, which is more or less what I wanted. But it's definitely lacking a lot, and part of that is because I just couldn't get it the movement to work the way I wanted it to. So anytime I tried to make the leaves move independently from the main stalk, they kind of just wiggled around, even at the bottom. So they kind of go in and out in a really awkward way that obviously doesn't make any sense realistically. So basically this method is using materials. So it's taking each of the different materials. So there's a material for the stalk, there's a material for the leaves, a material for the seed things coming out the top. So it differentiates them by material. So another thing I tried to do is I tried to make a different material for the tip of the leaf here. Obviously it wouldn't be pink in the final thing, but that's just for testing. And I imagine you can see what's wrong with this already, because I was really hoping that somehow maybe it would keep them attached, but I guess it just automatically separates the different materials. And so now there's a gap and it just kind of clips through the rest of the leaf. I mean, given a little bit more work, I think even just this right here doesn't look too bad considering it's really my first game. So if it comes to it, I will probably just do something like this, just some subtle, nice swaying in the wind. And that's really what I'm going to keep it at for now. But definitely a stretch goal for the future will be actually rigging these and giving them better animations. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you have any ideas on better ways to make it look like these are moving in the wind. So yeah, that's that. I'll keep working on these corn stalks and see if I come up with anything else. with all that done, it was time to enter Substance Painter, if I could get it to work. As always, there are a million issues, but that's kind of just what you learn to expect with new programs. And as frustrating as it can sometimes be, you just kind of learn to find ways around it. You find the solutions online somewhere, or you kind of just brute force it sometimes. I just play around with settings um, and try to guess what's wrong, or sometimes I don't even guess. Sometimes I just change settings until it eventually works. And that's sometimes all it takes, really. And as you can see here, I finally figured out the source of the problems, and it was that I needed to UV unwrap everything myself because I tried to let Substance Painter do it for me, and I guess it just layered everything on top of one another so it wouldn't bake the meshes properly. Um, so I eventually just had to unwrap it myself. I didn't really spend a lot of time doing it. I just wanted to get it unwrapped and everything um, layered on in a way that they weren't overlapping each other, so I could actually get all of the information accurately represented on each part of the model. And yeah, so now it's working, and now it is finally time for me to get into the actual texturing. And I have to say, I am so glad that I struggled through figuring out yet another new program, because Substance Painter is so powerful and you can do so much with it. And I had kind of only heard of it offhand before this. Even while I was doing this model, I wasn't even sure how I was going to be doing the texturing. I thought maybe I would just do it myself in Photoshop. However, I decided after seeing some other people on YouTube doing game dev videos that some of them were using Substance Painter, and I kind of saw how well it worked and decided I wanted to try that myself. And I'm so glad I did, because it is so fast and easy, and I'm definitely going to be using this for pretty much all of my projects going forward, just because of how high quality the textures are and how fast and simple it is to make them. All right, so this is it in game finally, and I've got to say it looks really good. I'm really happy with this. Uh, it's actually still just a prototype. I'm going to be redoing this for a third time pretty much, and then making all the variations of it just with everything that I've learned during the process of making this one. But now I'm just going to fast forward for you guys. I'm going to lay out a bunch of them and add some ambience and some lighting to the scene and see how it looks with all of that. So, yeah, I'll be right back. All right. And we're back in my testing level. And right away, I feel like you can, I mean, obviously, you can see the difference. These are just some bland gray corn stalks I was using in the first place to fill in the space. But yeah, just I love, especially in contrast with the gray. You can just really see the yellow orange hue that makes it feel so much more real and fit that very, I don't know how to describe it, just like a very orange, like a very pale orange aesthetic of like a farm and a cornfield, and it just makes it look so much more realistic and lifelike. And then you can see all the ridges and stuff in the leaf that I did in the texturing. Oh, I just love it so much. And I'm also testing out the flashlight being blue, just because before it was yellow. And I just love the contrast with that too. There's the orange light and the orange corn stalk, and then the blue flashlight. And it just makes me even more want to animate these leaves so they can jitter around in like a very light breeze a little bit. And if I could just get that done and make a few more variations and fill in like an area like this with corn stalks, with all their textures and everything done, that would be amazing. I just feel like that's going to look so good already. I'm so excited. But yeah, so there we go. It definitely is looking as good, if not better, than what I was hoping for. Uh, so that's a very good sign. I just gotta basically start it again from the beginning, just so I can fix any of the mistakes I made along the way with this one while I was just testing it out. I have some ideas. I'm probably going to build the rig into the modeling process itself, because I'll probably just make a bunch of flat base leaf shapes and then just put a skeleton in them so that I can bend them around, and that way I can pose them much more easily. And then in addition to that, I can also use that rig to animate it after. So I'm definitely leaning even more into animating these corn stalks. And yeah, so from here, I'm definitely going to see what I can do to try and model more of the corn stalks and just build like a more fully fleshed out scene. I'm going to do like some fog and everything like that. Maybe I'll do the lamppost next, just because they're going to be a big part of the scenes as well. Because I really just want to make something that looks a lot like the final scene is going to look like in time for Halloween. I'm hoping, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah, if I can get the corn stalks done at least, this ground is fine. This is literally just a block with a texture, so I might not even have to bother modeling the ground yet. But as long as I can get the corn stalks in, maybe even the lampposts, and actually build a whole area like this, it would really help to see how that's all going to come together and look. But I'm really excited for it. I think it's going to look great. So yeah, hopefully I'll have some more progress in time for Halloween. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying the progress I've been making so far. And if you have any suggestions about anything, any help in fixing any of the problems that I've been facing, because there's going to be way more of them as I go along for sure, that would help me out enormously. And also just any suggestions on these videos or anything else, anything you think I should add to the game eventually at some point. I would love to hear anything, any of your suggestions. So yeah, I will catch you guys next time.